ADHD is one of the most common childhood neurobehavioral disorders, occurring in 3 to 7% of school-age children. Children with high levels of hyperactivity, impulsivity, and inattention experience more social failure. Unable to control their impulsive actions, children with ADHD often do things they quickly regret. Consequently, children with ADHD have few friends because their peers cannot tolerate their disruptive behavior. I was a junior in high school and I was diagnosed because I was having so much trouble in school keeping my frustration level down. I was always angry, having mood swings, and it led to my parents bringing me to a psychiatrist. And eventually they realized it was in large part because of having attention deficit disorder.
My self-esteem was very, very low, and I hated myself a lot of times, and I didn't like, to be around people, and I didn't feel good about myself.
I was diagnosed as a little kid, but my parents opted not to medicate me. And then as an adult, when it became more and more apparent that I needed it really to help me function, I sought out to get treatment for it. I'm always convinced I'm going to forget something, so I'm constantly making notes and writing things down. And I live in fear of sort of dropping the ball in my job, because if I drop the ball, someone doesn't have a plane ticket, someone doesn't get a visa, so it becomes this sort of reliance thing that I've gotten really, really careful about it.
I was always getting yelled at because I wasn't always on topic, or I would try to change the topic because I was always confused because I couldn't pay attention because every little thing always distracted me. I could be trying to concentrate on the math test, but a butterfly would come through the window and I'd be like, ooh, that's pretty.
Say a regular person goes across the street, they're going to analyze everything around them. They're going to see the cars coming, they're going to look both ways, little things like that, and they're going to pick it up, and their natural senses are going to coordinate them across the road. Now, when you have ADHD, your mind is in a million different places. You're not going to focus on all those key elements that are going to help toward your survival.
I personally don't have it, but everybody else in my family did. And it would be like having 4 kids instead of, meat and 3 children. Academics can always be worked with, but kids that want to make friends and don't know how, and lash out and act out and sort of push people away, I find to be more problematic than anything in terms of academically in the classroom.
I had a lot of trouble with friends. It was hard to make friends because people didn't want to deal with me.
I don't know, we'd be eating, I'd be like, yo, you seen it outside though? They'd be like, what are you talking about? I'd be like, you didn't just see that gust of wind knock down that? They'd be like, no, what you talking about, dude? We're sitting here talking about next class. Oh. And I would just fall back out the crowd because I feel like an outcast.
If your teacher's going over something and then you miss it, you have to go back over it again, and if they're going to quiz you immediately after and you missed a section or two, that right there is a problem in and of itself, because that's going to affect your grades.
I had a lower self-esteem because I felt that they thought that I needed to have a lower class because I couldn't, I was not smart or something.
I know that I learned differently than other kids, but I didn't necessarily know why. There was no reason for me to attribute it to that, but I knew that the way that I thought about things was different, and I could jump from point A to point H without going through the steps in between, but in fact it was the steps in between that were what we were getting graded on.
It's like going from grayscale to going to rainbow. That's the first time I've made that analogy. It's really it's seeing things in black and white and how things are supposed to be. You see that those are the colors of something. But then you don't have medication and you see that there's a billion other things
And then it's not just what you're looking at, it's what you're hearing.
My eye movements are very, very difficult to keep still. My thoughts go very, very fast and are nearly impossible to control. When I'm medicated, it's much easier. I have one train of thought that I can follow. Still goes very fast, but it's not several different things at once, and I feel like I can actually control my thought process.
When I take medication, I can filter that all out. It's kind of almost like, I don't want to say losing, but not having peripheral vision. When I'm not medicated, I see everything, like my span of focus is everywhere. But when I take medication, my span of focus would be right here on what I should be focusing on instead of continually looking at everywhere.
I had a math teacher when I was younger who, because I was so slow and I really couldn't get it, for me math is very, very difficult, sent me out of the room to work by myself for the entire year, and gave me my own assignments, and that was devastating to me. That I couldn't, not only could I not keep up with my class, but I was sent to do it by myself. And it was formative. I was in 3rd grade, you know, so for me that was very, probably the most traumatic educational experience for me.
For students that I have with parents that are against, just across the board against medication, I see that it's a real problem because they can't really function at their highest level. And so they feel bad about themselves because, you know, they think they're stupid, or, you know, there's so many things that they can't do. And why can't they do that? Other people can do it.
For me, because this stimulation of the world is so much all the time, that hyperfocus, and I never really thought about it this way, actually, until just this second, allows you to turn off everything else. You know, if you have one thing, whatever it is, you know, then you don't have those symptoms all the time. Like, it's not the world coming at you. So it does look like you can focus, but in truth, you're only using it because you can't.
Kids with ADD, people with ADD, have this sort of hyper-focus drive where there may be a particular thing I can do with no medication and I can be really good at it.
Parents don't understand why you can't do anything else. A lot of times, kids who have attention disorder,
people think that that can be transferred to the rest of your life if you work at it hard enough, which isn't the case.
So many people would come to me and want to intervene, and I just wanted to be left alone and everybody just ignore what's going on and let me deal with it the way I wanted to deal with it. It was nerve-wracking. I mean, it was very anxiety-producing.
My daughter has shown signs very similar to me. She's always on the go, runs like a motor. We've had her tested. She has no physiological problems. We've done behavioral therapy for 6 months, and it's teaching her how to deal with it, but she can't effectively deal with it because she's not taking medication. So recently she has been prescribed medication, and in the time span that she has been, she feels so much better. She's doing so much better. She was so proud that she wasn't the last one to finish her tests. So frustrating and unfair that there's such a stigma about it that even I was hesitant to really say, my daughter needs medication, because people look down on you so much about it, which makes it really difficult, and there's a lot of parents who don't medicate children that need to be.
Some government jobs, if not most of them, when you have certain problems like ADHD, they can turn you away. While I went to basic training, I had another fellow private get turned away, or while he was there, stay an extra week after turning in his gear because they found out that he had a childhood case of ADHD. They immediately turned him away, and he wasn't able to serve his country because of a problem he had already gotten hold of and already taken care of.
Whenever I teach, one of the first things I tell my students is I'm dyslexic and I have ADHD. It's one of the first things we have during our first time together, and I'll say, and it affects the way I teach, it affects the way you're going to learn. And if there are ways in which we need to sort of cope with that, we will. I said, feel free to correct my spelling. If I forget to do something, remind me, forgive me, it's not intentional, but we'll do the best that we can sort of figuring it out together. So as a professional, I deal with it instantly. Most ADD medications, I know you know this, are stimulants. And so for other people, they make you crazy. But for us, they sort of even you out a little bit. And for me, that's really what it felt like, is that all of a sudden, like, the whole world slowed down, in addition to concentration. But like things really quite literally felt like they were moving more slowly around me.
From my understanding, what happens when you take a stimulant and you're a normal person, you speed up. You do things faster, your brain starts processing quicker. But if you have attention deficit disorder, it has an adverse reaction and you start processing
the ability
slower.
to filter out information. There's some noise over here that normally when I'm in this room I don't hear when I take medication, but it's really loud.
There's generally no hierarchy to the things that I'm processing. Every little thing is the exact amount of stimuli as everything else. It's impossible to have that much sensory information going to your head at the same time and trying to pick out what you actually are supposed to focus on.
My ability to filter out unneeded sensory information is very, very limited without medication.
For my ADHD, I take Adderall. It helps me a lot more in focusing. And when I was off of it for a small amount of time because I ran out, I noticed how different I was. And the Adderall definitely helps me stay under control.
I really get the pushback against it, and I think as a parent, I would also have trouble with it. I don't want to squelch what is naturally my child. But then, and again, I don't know how you would know that. But I don't resent it, but I really regret that my parents who knew that I had this diagnosis weren't able to sort of bring themselves to do that. Like, I wish that they really had. But again, I get that that's the far end of the spectrum from what you usually hear about being so overdiagnosed.
For 6 months, I was on a non-narcotic drug called Strattera, and that helped a lot. I went from being a student that got 2s and 3s to a student that got 3+ and 4s.
My big outlet was sports. That became for me the thing that really focused me. Martial arts, they'd say put ADHD kids in Taekwondo and karate, and my parents did. And I've been doing it now for 28 years. So it's the only thing that's ever kept my focus in that sort of way. It's funny, a lot of parents are really against medicating their kids for ADHD. It's highly overdiagnosed, and I see that and I agree with them. I'm a kid who really would have benefited from it. And so I absolutely appreciate why my parents didn't do it, and at the same time, my entire life would have been drastically different had they done it. And so it's a very, very fine line, I think, for parents.
I understand that a lot of people think that there's too much medicating of children in this country or whatever. But for kids who really need it, I think it's almost a form of child abuse to not let them at least try.
He explained the symptoms and the signs and what the problems were, and then, oh my God, I keep touching my hair and putting my hand, and I'm like thinking about editing. It's going to be terrible. Oh my God, this all needs to go in.